Hey class, this week wanted to cover chapter 2 and discuss sleep. This is one of the things that I will typically tell clients, athletes, whomever I'm working with, that when I sort of do a needs analysis assessment, I want to get this, I want to get stronger, I want to get faster, I want to build more, whatever. The first thing I'm going to ask them is, tell me about your sleep. And you might ask, that's typically not the first thing that we kind of inquire about. Usually, what's your training history? What have you done? Where have you, the last time you kind of worked out? How long you've been consistent? I'm always wanting to know, tell me about your sleep. Sleep is the most important thing that we need to manage from a pure performance perspective. And I'm not talking about elite athleticism either. I'm talking about just general basic performance from a job perspective, from a day-to-day perspective, to be the best partner, to be a best parent, to be a best sibling, etc. So the ramifications of not having enough sleep are significant, and this week's material will cover all of that. All right, so why does sleep actually matter for athletes? And again, I'd like to just kind of even drill out of just saying athletes, but just really for anyone. Sleep is really the only way we can recover from fatigue. And fatigue can be cumulative in nature, meaning it doesn't just have to be athletic performance. It could be, stress of day, life stuff. So there's a physiological recovery that we need to kind of get through, as well as a psychological recovery. And without sleep, we're going to struggle with maintaining our basic biological functions that are essential for not only just baseline living, but certainly come into question when we're talking about high level performance, right? So that can be a significant difference between excellent performance and excellent performance. So we're going to see that inadequate sleep is going to negatively impact performance, motivation, cognition, which is a really big one, and increases injury and illness risk. So because our immune system now is compromised because of cumulative lack of sleep, we're just at a greater risk for disease, for illness. And then if you think cognition, right? And we've seen this, they've done tremendous studies in the military in particular, dealing with soldiers who have to stay up and whatever, it's the Navy SEALs, they want to stress them out as much as possible, but they realize how quickly cognition, your ability to kind of think logically, diminishes very significantly once you're sleep deprived or once you're not getting enough sleep. I wanted to include this simple little chart that I found. I thought this was actually interesting. If you see in the middle column there, the level of preparedness starting at the top from elite, and then at the very bottom, awful. And then go just to the left of that, and you're going to see hours per night. 9 hours is going to be elite, so you're getting a little bit of extra, making up for any missed. 8 hours is going to be great, and we really want to shoot for our 8 hours. 7 is good, 8 is better, 9 is elite. So that's the way you need to think of this. If you get into the 6 hours, the 5 hours, now we're talking about bad and awful. And just going to be terrible overall on your body. And makes a significant difference in total hours that we sleep. So I'm hoping that this actual mini lecture in this chapter is a calling card for any students in the class who are trying to burn the candle at both ends. And that's one of the things that I notice, at least at the community college level. A lot of students are unfortunately tasked with having to work full time, and then also having to figure out how to do school. And your ability to think, I've had students, I've seen this literally, are working night shifts, going home, sleeping for a few hours, and then coming into class, and they look like death. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. They just are not present. And it's because the lack of sleep is that puts a significant impact on all of your bodily functions, including your mental faculties. All right, so what are the physiological impacts of sleep and lack thereof? So from a restorative perspective, it's going to up-regulate anabolic metabolism. So think about training, tissue repair. That is going to be critical, especially if you're competitive every day in an athletic environment and or lifting weights, but not only just lifting weights, but your performance on the field. Every time you sprint, every time you jump, right? These all will cause some trauma to the tissues that you need sleep in order to recover those specific trauma. And protein synthesis, the rate at which we can actually generate protein, becomes tied into this as well. It consolidates procedural memories. So think about skill learning. It actually will start to file those away and organize those in a way that allows you to retain them. Augments immune responses, as I've said. So if your immune system is not fully up to speed, if it's suboptimal, right, you're just going to, any bacteria or any infections that you have now become more difficult for your body to fight. So things that your body would normally handle, because on any given level we're constantly fighting infections, we're constantly fighting foreign bodies in our systems. I think the running, it's not even a joke. I was going to say the running joke, but really the running statement, one of the statements I always say is how much of your body weight is made up of bacteria, and it's up to like 4 pounds, something significant. So all of those bacteria, some good, some are not so good, need to be managed. Your immune system is constantly doing this self-regulation, so don't be grossed out that you have all this bacteria in your body. As long as you're getting your sleep, your immune system is going to take care of you. If not, shame on you, because you're not doing what you need to do. And then we also get key hormones. So at night in particular, that is when growth hormone is released. So you will not get, or you'll get poor growth hormone release, which will facilitate some of the muscle repair. So sleep becomes a really, really critical part for hormone consistency. And then consequences of sleep deprivation are going to include obviously reduced time to exhaustion. So the less time, you'll become even more tired. You're going to have decreased muscle strength, negative mood state, impaired motivation, effort, perception, and cognition. So just from a pure academic perspective, those are some reasons why we have to think of our students training their brains in college, right? You're kind of a brainiac. The sport is learning. So you've got to put yourself in the best possible position to be able to absorb the information that you're learning, some of which is exciting, some of which is incredibly boring. So how are you going to even be able to pay attention and absorb any of stuff that's super boring if you're playing with a partial deck of recovery? So that becomes a really critical piece to this for those of you just kind of focusing on college, not so much the athletic side of things. All right, so one of the things that we can do is actually monitor sleep. And I don't know if it's occurred to anyone in the class, but I will tell you that I have a lot of clients over the years and a lot of other folks in the performance enhancement space that look at sleep, want to get some deeper meaning and understanding of sleep of each in particular individual. So it allows us to understand the responses to training and readiness, and can allow us to actually make adjustments on the fly if we notice that, let's say, sleep was not as good a previous night or over the course of several nights, and we had set like a 1 rep max day or something that was very, very intense. We might say, well, you haven't gotten enough recovery, so I want to pull back on that. And there are systems that we can look at beyond this that I think should be considered when we're talking about performance enhancement from a technical perspective, from a sleep perspective, but really looks at something different, and I'll mention that in a little bit. So we want to be able to reduce the risk of injury, right? So if we're not getting our recovery, we want to be able to make sure that we're not going to be tasking our athletes with excessive demands that their brain can't handle because they're sleep deprived. That includes illness, and then that overreaching concept. Overreaching is when we're going to push harder than our current capability so that we can make new adaptations to the tissues and the nervous system and make ourselves better. Overreaching is pulled off the table if sleep is not part of this dynamic. But I also think any resistance training program or any truly technically optimally built program that uses periodization has structured overreaching built into it. So if you're not getting adequate sleep, your periodization, your design of a program that should have long-term change built into it over time will be compromised. You also identify athletes that need sleep intervention, so we can start to say, hey, we're noticing this about athlete you athlete X. We need to sit down and actually have a little bit more in-depth conversation about what you're doing, because you're not setting yourself up for success. And in fact, you're going to cost your team because you're not able to actually perform at your best level. And within that, we can optimize recovery strategies, which we'll talk about in a minute. So a couple ways we can look at this is polysomnography And that would be sort of a lab base. You're sitting in a lab, you're hooked up to electrodes, they're monitoring your brain, they're monitoring all the things, you're being watched with a camera. It's a completely dark place, and you just kind of stay overnight, and they get an idea of what's going on. Actigraphy is going to be wrist-worn like accelerometers. So these are going to be things that you wear on your wrist that can kind of give an idea about your sleep duration, quality. And this might be practical for athletes, but it may underestimate sleep for folks who move around a lot during sleep. So that also, because the accelerometer is actually measuring how much you move, and it's assuming that when you're moving a lot, you're not sleeping as well because you're in a different phase of sleep at that point. The other way we could do this is through sleep diaries and or questionnaires. The downside of these is that they will be subjective, but can be useful in concert or along with a more objective measure. And then every individual is going to be a little bit different. So sleep patterns are different. The time when we go to bed, how much we sleep, everything's going to be a little bit different. So individualization is going to be part of this. On the right-hand side, you're going to see if anyone has an iPhone, and the same in Android, in the Apple iPhone Health app, you can actually set up to monitor sleep. If you have a Apple Watch, you can actually, that's your accelerometer. And you can wear that, and it will measure all of the things that there's like 8 or 9 things that it will measure if you look at your health and then go into sleep. Average awake time, average REM sleep, average core sleep. So it actually starts to break out, and there's I think 7 or 8 different categories it can start to perceive and give you a little bit of insight into your sleeping. So you might want to play with some of the settings on your phone and see if you can make some adjustments, even if it's just, I sleep at this point, like just you see mine is just measuring sleep. I woke up, you can see on the right-hand side where there's some gaps. And that means I woke up, I probably either picked up my phone, but there was a function at one point where it could listen to you. And I was trying to play with it, and I haven't seen that function in recently. So I'm not sure if that got changed. But I encourage you to play with it, and maybe in discussion you can share anything that you found about any of the sleep apps that you already have built in on your phone. All right, so this concept of sleep hygiene is, think about it as dental hygiene, right? There are certain things we need to do in order to maintain a healthy mouth. They always say mouth is the window to the body. And so an unhealthy mouth will typically, we see there's correlation between having unhealthy gingivitis, gum disease, and things of that nature and people are at greater risk for cardiac events. So this is just a total sidebar. If you're not flossing, shame on you. You got to be flossing every time you're brushing. Brushing twice a day, flossing twice a day. That's the minimum. If you're not doing that, you need to do that, right? So just FYI, and for those of you that are 18, 19, 20, the chemistry in your mouth changes at this point. So if you didn't have a lot of cavities when you were younger, your mouth is more susceptible to cavities if you don't have good oral hygiene, including flossing, because you'll get cavities in between your teeth. You've got to get some of that muck out of your mouth. And no one wants to kiss a mouth that's not being taken care of. So that's a whole different conversation, different class. Take one of our health classes for that. But in general, think of sleep hygiene the same way you would think of as dental hygiene, in that there are things that we need to do and interventions that we need to be consistent with in order to make sleep as optimal as possible. So it'll be recommendations, strategies, behaviors, and conditions to promote sleep quality as well as duration. And think about quality for a second. Like, you may sleep for 8 hours, but if you're chronically waking up or it's distracting and you're not able to get into that deep REM sleep, into those deep beta waves that you need to get into, that's a problem. And I think living in a major metro area, this can be a problem. If you have a noisy neighborhood, if you have car alarms, if you have all of these sounds, and it can make it very difficult to sleep. The other thing is understanding. So the importance of understanding how critical sleep is to an athlete's success. And so educating your athletes on sleep hygiene, your clients on sleep hygiene, can obviously positively impact sleep duration, quality, and daytime sleepiness. And then this is really the conversation around strategy. So managing exposure to light, especially artificial light such as screen near bedtime. Establish consistent bedtime routines. Address factors like late training, competition schedules, and travel. So, and it depends, you might have a late game. Athletes might have late games. Like, a lot of things change on the fly. So we always going to have to make do with what we can, but having this conversation around the day-to-day practice of sleep, just like practice running, lifting weights needs to be, and nutrition needs to be an incredibly important aspect of this. All right, so this is an athlete checklist I found. I thought this was great. This will dovetail along with what you're going to be watching in the TED Talk. But things that we want to kind of look at and make sure are happening in order to optimize sleep. First and foremost, quiet environment, right? What do we need to do? If we need to wear earplugs, wear earplugs. Whatever you got to do to make the noise go away. You want ambient room temperature that is around 64 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's going to be a little cooler. Your body needs to drop its temperature in order to actually get into deep sleep. Your bedding and clothing, you got to make sure that the bedding isn't too warm. It doesn't overheat you, including the clothing. The clothing isn't abrasive or rough, something that's going to wake you up. So make sure we kind of pay attention to what we're wearing. Sleep routine is number 4. That's going to be having consistency. Ideally, we would be doing, especially if you're playing sports, get to bed at the same time each and every night. I would encourage you to get to bed by 10 o'clock. Get your 8 hours. That means you can get up at 6. If you got to get an extra hour in there, that means you get up at 7. So that is optimal, but you've got to have a sleep routine. And some of you already say, hey, I have all this already. That's fantastic. So, you're already ahead of the game. But for those of us that don't, I think it's important to remind on this kind of checklist, which is really ultimately sleep hygiene. Avoid caffeine in food. Some people really have trouble sleeping, especially if you're sensitive to caffeine. It's kind of funny because I don't. For whatever reason, I can pound coffee and fall right asleep. Now, I don't know physiologically how much of an impact that's having on me, but my body will have to process the caffeine and get that out of there. But I don't have any issues falling asleep with caffeine. So everyone's individual, so it's something that you're going to have to keep an eye on for you. And most of you know you best. But when you're working with athletes, we're going to have a little bit of a conversation around this. 5, avoid, that was 5, sorry. Number 6, avoid tech. So ideally, we would be going to bed, and I know this is hard for all of us, putting our phones away, not having the light be present, because the light can be disruptive to our overall sleep. So be mindful of that. And I'm guilty of all that stuff, so it is what it is. Number 7, napping too late. So if you're taking naps later in the day, that's dramatically going to impact your ability to actually get to bed on time, and or your ability to sleep in general. So make sure that you're not napping too late in the day. Now, this says get at least 7 hours. I would say you got to get at least 8. 8 hours is key. 7, sure, but as we saw before, 8 is golden. If we can get an extra hour in there, even better. I know it's not always realistic to get the full sleep, but also remember that there's this sleep debt. So you can try and make it up, but it takes more time to make up that sleep debt. So if you're really sleep deprived or missing sleep, it might take multiple days for you to actually make it up. And then 9, ensure a dark room with no light source present. So make sure that you got some good shades, get some blackout curtains, whatever you need to do to make sure that it is nice and dark. All right, so in conclusion, obviously sleep is very critical, often overlooked component of athletic recovery and performance. Inadequate sleep duration quality has a significant negative impacts on ability to perform optimally and basically, right? So don't just think it's like, oh, it's only for athletes. No, I'm talking basic mental processing. What was on my grocery list? I cannot remember, or I don't remember what I need. Simple things like that go awry when we don't get quality sleep. Monitoring sleep, ideally using an objective and subjective method in a perfect scenario, is crucial for individual athletes to get an idea of kind of how their recovery is going, how their sleeping is going, and then being sure to implement any sleep hygiene strategies to optimize recovery, health, and performance. All right, kind of a quick chapter this week, but I think it's still nonetheless, you got a couple activities to do So make sure you get to those. If you have any questions, as always, please feel free to put it in the question discussion board, and I will get to it hopefully sooner rather than later. All right, talk to you soon.